Hey, Philip, thanks so much for joining us today at the studio. It's what a joy to get you in the reel here.
Well, you're very welcome, and it's a great pleasure to be here.
Well, Altadena, your neighborhood is quite a spot for current former Imagineers. I don't know. I mean, I know Zolt was there. Joe Brody,
right? Corey Silson, Trevor Bride. There's a whole bunch of people there.
Is that just because it's the affordable creative district? Or
right. Back in the day, it certainly was.
Yeah, not so much these days.
Still is.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, that it's kind of like the Pasadena fringe. I don't know.
It's really, right on the edge of sort of civilization. Yeah. A little further north, you're out into the national forest, the mountains.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear the story of how you got from the shores of sunny old England.
Right.
Well, actually, before that, right? You grew up outside of England.
Yeah, I grew up in France. My dad had a job before the war in France, and then at the end of the war, we didn't have a GI Bill in England, so everybody came back from the war, went on the dole, on the unemployment. And so he got a job. They offered him his job back in France. So he went there. And we all moved. I was 6 months old, I think, and went
wow.
So my first experiences of life are all in France. That's all I could remember.
In Monet's hometown.
Yeah, right. Right.
Pretty artsy.
Yeah. And it was a beautiful old town that was flattened in the war. And so it was just rubble, you couldn't really tell where the high street was,
Wow.
And it was so bad. And then it was rebuilt in this sort of new brutalist style, all concrete. And
so is that what inspired you to study architecture then? All that 70s brutalism?
No, I mean, my inspiration for architecture was really my high school art teacher, who was brilliant, really.
Okay.
And he taught us the history of architecture and the history of painting and sculpture. And so we had a really good grounding in both of those by the time we left high school.
Wow. Cambridge architecture, then switched art, like what made
I started out at Cambridge doing architecture, and then I thought really actually I'd be better suited to be a painter and a sculptor.
Okay.
So I left the School of Architecture, went in, and unfortunately Cambridge does not have a fine art department. I don't know why. I think it was crazy actually, but so I had to go to London to art school. And I started out at Hornsey, did my first year there, then did 3 years at Chelsea Art School.
Chasing those Chelsea girls.
And that was the time when, Chelsea was the center of civilization.
The place to be. Yeah, we could go on a tangent, just talk about the music scene back in that day. But, awesome. So what brought you to the shores of you had?
Well, I got a job teaching fine art at Sir John Cass in London, this art school. And at the same time, I was building a sailboat because a friend of ours was starting to build a boat. And then another guy, Patrick Head, and I both decided, well, if he's building one, we could certainly build one. So we all started building 3 separate boats. And eventually I finished my boat and decided I was always going to go someplace, some long journey. And so I decided to come to the U.S. and sailed over from London down through the Caribbean and up to Florida.
On the boat that you built?
On the boat I built.
So you just had some self-confidence that you built that?
Well, I had a lot of help, and it turned out a pretty good boat. I still have it. It's still floating.
That's impressive. Wow, that's a good...
But when we landed in Port Canaveral, I think we had $10 between us. This is my wife and I.
Okay. Wow.
And
what a journey.
So I got a job in a factory. It was actually a place building museum exhibits. And somebody said, well, you should go check out Disney. They're doing some interesting things. And At the time, Disney, it was WED, WED, what became Walt Disney Imagineering.
Right.
They were building Epcot and Tokyo Disneyland at the same time, and they were like overwhelmed with work. So we were building some of the work in Florida, some of the scenery and the animatronics and that kind of thing. So I got a job there.
Wow.
Essentially in production.
Yeah.
So
fabrication.
Yeah. Fabrication.
Wow.
Yeah.
Of one of the biggest themed entertainment pieces of work in history up to that.
Right, yeah. And to me, it was unbelievable, the budgets that were involved, $1 billion budgets. And I never run into this kind of thing before.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. I even today I miss the scale of that energy, universe of energy dinosaur. I mean, to be in that theater environment.
Right, yeah. It was great.
Fast.
Yeah. So our shop at one point was just full of dinosaurs.
Yep.
You know, right?
Wow. Okay, so fascinating. Architecture, art, right into the fabrication side of that world.
And then I got sent to Tokyo at the end of Epcot, and because I was already doing field art direction. So I got sent to Tokyo when Ralph Nielsen, who's another TEA master, got injured, and went from there. When we opened Tokyo Disneyland, my department was completely closed up. So they sent me to fly to California, to Glendale, to the model shop. And shortly after that, the whole big layoff happened at Disney.
Post-Tokyo.
We thought it was the end. After the Tokyo opening, which was a year after Epcot. I mean, we were doing these two projects sort of back to back, you know. So that was arguably the birth of the TEA.
Absolutely.
That was
right.
When Monty Lundy went out and started Technifex, and everybody went off and started their own companies. And that, in a sense, transformed the theme park industry.
Absolutely. You know? And did you leave WDI and then get invited?
Yeah, I got laid off from WDI and then went back and worked as a contractor.
Okay.
And the big job that I did with Disney was the Indiana Jones stunt show.
Still running today.
Still running.
Still in an anchor, people eater.
It was supposed to be last 3 years.
Yeah.
I
was a 2,200 person venue there, still major capacity anchor, right?
Yeah.
Wow. And was that an opening day? I can't remember. Was that opening day attraction, or was that kind of a year-wide?
That was an opening day attraction. Actually, I think we opened officially probably like a couple of months later, but we were doing rehearsals on opening.
I know from Tim Kirk's original sketch, that was always like got to be that live action stunt show was always.
Yeah, it was. We had Tom Gideon did the first series of illustrations for it, and then we had a bunch of movie art directors who worked on it also, and a movie stunt guy, Glenn Randall, and who advised us on what kind of stunts we ought to do. He'd been working on one of the earlier Indiana Jones films.
Wow.
And then Frank Weigand was the show engineer on it, and he was amazing. He kept the thing together, you know. So it was a very ambitious project, very short time. When I started out, it was going to be a Cleopatra sea battle.
Wow.
And then my second week there, they said, "Oh no, okay, Indiana Jones."
Okay. Wow.
Same venue, which was already built, you know. At the time. So we just roll with the punches, you know. And
wow.
Yeah.
So can you describe kind of your role? I'm working under Bob Weiss as the park-wide kind of producer. Your role as show producer on that.
Yeah, we had a structure of a project manager and show producer. Mm-hmm. Show producer was responsible for the experience that the audience would see, and the project manager was responsible for the budget and the schedule.
Yep.
So
John, in our interview with John, John Lindsay really talked about that kind of complementary partnership,
right,
in the left, right brain project manager.
So, as a show producer in those days was responsible for the experience, but also to deliver this on time and on budget, So I worked with Ron Carmen, who was a project manager, very closely, and we had small meetings. At that time, the whole project was pretty, from point of view of the number of people working on it was quite small, really, by Disney standards. And I think we had about 10 people in a meeting every day.
I'm not a big fan, but the way that Imagineering's evolved with this new kind of creative director role, is what they use as producers, which are basically, frankly, political people that can talk well, present well. They're team leaders, which is good.
Yeah.
Typically, they're not really creative. They don't really write. They don't design.
Right.
They're kind of like people handlers. I mean, they're leaders, they're project leaders, which is cool. But basically, the idea was, hey, the creative, may not be the best person, because it was almost a lack of trust that the creative leader, can really truly own budget, scope, and schedule. Whereas I think, back in your day, there was that full ownership of that. And John was great because he was absolutely, he goes, I think it's disrespectful to say that you can't be a creative leader and also think about the big pictures and where you would prefer to make cuts. And so it was a really good, fascinating card. I'd love to get your take on that producer role.
Yeah. In my day, in the Disney Hollywood Studios, that in our day was called Studio Tour. But when we were working on that project, the show producer was the person who delivered the experience to the audience. The project manager was the guy who's sort of pulling the strings, making sure that you don't go over budget, you don't spend too much time on this particular element, and was sort of controlling it. The show producer had a sort of dual responsibility. One is to deliver the idea, the concept, but secondly, to deliver it on time and on budget. So he worked hand in hand with the project manager to make sure that we didn't run over either budget or.
So you really had to see the big picture. You had to manage budget, scope, schedule. You couldn't just focus on it being the greatest show, blowing the scope.
Right. Exactly. But you also had to hire the art director, the show designer. So you had to run that side of things. And it was an interesting role in a way that it was
kind of a renaissance kind of right?
Yeah, it was great actually, because you were both responsible for the concept getting built.
Yeah.
And realized, and also for making sure that it happened on time and on budget, or reasonably, or as near as the budget as you could manage.
Yes, and then you have a heightened view to where you could know which parts you need to kind of, enhance or protect or
right. And there were a lot of hard decisions made. Things that you really liked, you really wanted to have in the show, which you realize we don't have time for that. Yeah. We don't have the money for that, and so some things would get thrown out, and then in the process of that, you realize what it is that you really want to show. When you think is at the center of the idea of this show that you're presenting, and so you would defend those ideas and let the other ones go.
In my experience, when the client, owner, operator is asking for good, fast, and cheap. Quite often, perfect world, those are always in that perfect project balance, right? But the reality is every once in a while, one of those takes priority precedence. Have you ever had that where one of the three, with the stunt show was one of those three, a little more important than...
Yeah, and also in this case, we had a lot of very difficult physical stunts that we wanted to do that involved live actors and real explosions,
life and death,
real gas, big, fast moving things,
right?
And so we had to make sure that it was safe as well, both for the actors who were in it and for the audience. And so it was like everything was in play,
right,
in a way.
Yeah. So not only couldn't you kill anybody from a scope perspective, I imagine you had a pretty tight schedule.
Oh, yeah, very tight schedule.
When you're trying to sync up with a park company, there's not a lot of options in terms of deferred.
Plus, we were also using, for the first time for Disney, I think, outside people.
Oh, right.
Because that particular project, for some reason, ran into a staffing problem, and both from the fabrication point of view and from the design point of view.
For some reason, being Typhoon Lagoon, Pleasure Island,
there were all these
Disney
things
decade, things on top of each other, right?
And so all our design crew were outside people.
Okay.
And when we went to the Disney fabrication people and said, "Can you build this?" They said, "Well, no, we don't have time. We're busy doing other things."
Yeah.
So we had to go outside for that and for the engineering.
Thank goodness for a themed entertainment association. Yeah. A little cottage industry.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Now, I think that's where...
That's why we're here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that ability to be there when Disney or whoever needs to pass them a baton. Because
right. Yeah, and in fact, Tech Effects was working on that project. Yeah, and some other companies too. Show Motion, other people like that. So it was an adventure in a way, and I think the fact that it came out in the end, as a success, in the sense of the audience liked it, it was a wonderful line that Frank Weigand, who was a project manager and who worked on it, from day one, he said at one point he heard this noise when we were doing a rehearsal, and he thought, it was a gas hissing or something like that, and he was looking around for a problem, and then he came out and he realized, oh no, that's the audience clapping,
Nice problem.
That's right. And it hadn't occurred to him that there were 2,000 people out there looking at this thing.
Yeah, that's focus. Well, I appreciate that producer project manager pairing, because there was the expectation, and I presumably delivered that the producer has a left and a right lobe fully intact. You're not just the crazy creative that the project manager has to kind of keep under control.
Right. And then the engineering side of it was tricky, because this was the first stunt show we'd ever done with live actors and show action equipment. And we had big fire
explosions,
explosions,
right? Flamage.
And we had to keep these actors safe, and so the engineering side of it was very experimental, and a lot of stuff that we did on that show had never been done before. Mm-hmm. And so we were both under time constraint, but also under this safety. We couldn't hurt anybody and certainly we couldn't have anything threaten the audience either. So it was a balance between how close can you bring the action to the audience, and how you can make sure that nothing untoward happens.
Well, back in that day, do you remember, was there any benchmarking? I'm trying to remember how far along Universal had gotten with their, I thought it was more the Wild West stunt show.
Yeah, they had a Wild West stunt show, I think was going at the time, happened right after it.
Right, but the scale of the sets and the explosions, and the show action was probably another level.
Yeah, it was a big show, and we had lighting in the show, and it's a broad daylight, right?
Right.
And this lighting designer, I remember telling me this is the first time he's ever had to light in daylight.
Right. Yeah, I didn't realize what a kind of a seminal project that was. Really, it's pre-Waterworld, pre-lights, motors, action.
Right.
That was a big.
And it was, I think, the first show that we ever did that was computer controlled. So we had a stage manager who would hit cues when he thought the actor was in the right place and safe. But the actual cue was executed by a computer. So he would just initiate a computer. And that was the first time that we had lighting, effects, show action equipment, and sound, all computer controlled,
Wow.
And this is before you could buy a computer, frankly,
Yes. Well, the whole balance of kind of the how you make the movie, kind of backsider, cut, and then addressing the audience with the idea of actually the audience viscerally living those scenes. It was really kind of a unique creative balance that really almost...
Right. And the Indiana Jones story was still pretty big in the movies. I mean, it still is today. New one just came out, right?
Yeah.
So people were very interested in how things were done in the movies. That's what that show was. The premise of the whole show is how special effects are filmed.
Was George Lucas pretty hands off, or was pretty?
Yeah, I mean, aside from lending us Glenn Randall from the movies, and he had negotiated the deal with Disney, with WDI, and then he stood away. But we got some of the props and things from the movie production that was going on at the time. So some of that is in the queue.
Well,
but most of it is based on the earlier movies.
Okay. Well, what a testament to the success that it's still playing the packed audience.
I know, it's amazing.
Still need lighting lanes just to get in, for proceeding. Wow. So post Disney, did you stick around? What was the gap between that and starting Vertex?
Yeah. Well, when I started Vertex, we really were doing museum things initially. We did a thing for the Natural History Museum on Chaparral and fire and the cycle of fire. And we used lighting and show control and those kinds of theme park technologies that we developed in the theme park industry to apply them to storytelling.
Yeah,
in the museum.
Kind of revolutionary at the time.
Yeah.
Did you have any suspicious eyes in the museum exhibit design world?
Well, some of the museum designers really didn't like the idea that we were muscling into their industry, But what the museum wanted, stories that were told in a compelling way.
Wow.
And what we had in the theme park industry was a way of, between all these different kinds of technologies working together, you could tell a story in a way that was really pretty compelling, pretty engrossing, Mm-hmm. And so they liked that about the theme park industry, and that became a sort of norm that we went on and did some work in the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago and different places where we were using the same kind of technologies to tell a story,
And we have a kind of a shared collaborator, partner in Robin Hall. That I know was your business partner for a lot of years.
Yeah, Robbie was
wonderful.
I mean, he's both he draws beautifully, and he's a great master planner, and he has an understanding of how theme parks are, how stories are told. And he'd done some amazing work before he came work with me, and then he worked on this U-505 exhibit for the submarine exhibit for the Museum of Natural History, the Science and Industry, rather, in Chicago. And that was a really poignant kind of story that he told there.
And still going strong.
He's still going strong. Yeah, he's still working.
Yeah, well, we just collaborated last month on our latest master plan. So, but yeah, what a unique couple. I mean, I think in Buzz Price's book, I think he gave Robin credit as one of the best master planners.
Oh, really? Yeah.
He'd ever worked with. That says.
Well, I would certainly second that.
Yeah.
I think he's been
awesome.
And he was a great guy to work with.
How long were you guys in actual partnership?
We worked together for about 10 years.
Wow.
So,
That's great. Did he ever raise his voice once? I got to ask.
No.
I mean, anyone that does Robin knows that he's the most gentle, kind, humble,
right.
spirit in the industry, probably. That's great.
And we had another guy called Droney Angar, who was our architect.
Yeah.
And he and Robin worked really well.
Right.
And they became the sort of master planning team,
Yeah, that's a combo.
Yeah.
That's great.
And Robin is always drawing by hand, and Drone was already working in 3D and on computer and stuff. So the combination was great.
Combo, right? Yeah. Awesome. Any other favorite collaborations in that season?
Well, I think I mentioned Drone Yenga. I mean, he and I had worked together for a long time. He came right out of UCLA grad school to us at Vertex, and we worked at least 10 years, maybe 12 years together. And he was an amazing guy, really. And he brought that whole computer modeling, visualization to Vertex. So he became, one man really became our IT department, our 3D department, everything. And he's also a great planner.
Designer.
And he's went on now, and he's a master planner, for a major architectural company. So
now, was there any Vertex production projects that were a little closer to home?
Well, our closest project was the USS Iowa project.
Right, Port of LA.
In Port of LA, which is still sort of unknown. I don't know.
I see it every night on my Love Boat reruns, man. That's the opening, closing scenes.
But we went right from the very beginning. We got approached by the team that was trying to find a home for the USS Iowa. And when we first visited, it was still in Suisun Bay out near San Francisco, part of the mothball fleet that the U.S. Navy keeps. And they had just decided that they're never going to use this ship.
Well, there's a whole story behind the ship, though.
Right. The ship was built in the beginning of World War II at a time when battleships were already kind of obsolete in a way. The World War II was mostly a aircraft carrier, sea battles, but the battleships were there protecting the aircraft carriers and doing shore bombardment and that sort of thing. But this was a state-of-the-art battleship, 33 knots, like an amazing ship. And when we got it, it became the museum for the battleship. It was the fourth of these battleships to become a museum. Right. And now it's moving on to becoming the Museum of the Surface Fleet, which is, sort of the next iteration of its. But, creating a museum inside a battleship is not that easy.
Talk about a fixed canvas.
I mean, the space
it's not exactly a show building, right?
No, the spaces are small, the ceilings are low.
Right.
The spaces are small on purpose because they wanted it to be able to survive a serious attack. And so we took one deck of the battleship and created a museum out of a part of it, actually.
Do you remember the hourly throughput on that walkthrough?
I don't really, but it was low compared to anything in the theme parks because you had to come down a staircase.
Right. Accessibility, flow.
Yeah, and then we had all sorts of, fire department. Is there a sprinkler system? So it went from being a warship
my head hurt.
to suddenly a public, venue. And so, tricky, right?
Okay, Well, can't wait to experience that. I'm ashamed to say I haven't yet experienced, but I know that whole Port Sakal is under redevelopment. So what a great anchor.
Yeah, it's a great space. It will be, I think, when it's finished, will be a really interesting space. Port Sakal was an old, quite popular attraction on the waterfront, mostly restaurants and retail, and then fell out of favor somehow, and now is coming into its second iteration. The new developer and the battleship is right there.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting evolving. That whole waterfront actually in San Pedro is being developed by the city to be a sort of because it's one of the few waterfronts that LA really has.
It's LA. Yeah. It is LA's waterfront. Yeah. It's the world port.
Yeah.
Well, so international background. You've worked U.S. You've worked abroad. Any pros, cons, brain damage warnings of all the international experience?
Well, on the internet, we did a lot of work in Asia.
Sure.
Initially in Japan, which because I'd worked there before on Tokyo Disneyland, was more familiar, and but then we worked in Korea and in China, and a lot of the parks in China are pretty basic, really, ride parks mostly, So bringing the idea of a attraction-based park to China was quite a challenge, really. And sometimes, an education for the client, and sometimes for us, and trying to how to do this kind of thing on a budget. The budgets are always smaller there because the ticket price is less.
Especially pre-Disney and Universal opening up.
Right.
Almost at a certain bench of what was acceptable.
Right. And so, we had a great time, though, working there, I have to say. And, the food in China is amazing, and the people are amazing.
The diversity of the different regions and cities.
Right.
That's all kind of mind-blowing for a lot of folks that haven't.
Yeah. The first project we did in Hainan, that was the first project we did in China. And then we told them we were going to go to Shanghai, and they said, "Oh, be careful over there. They're all crooks in Shanghai." So we said, "This is the same country, right?" Yeah, but there's a lot of regionalism in China, which I hadn't realized, when I first went there.
Well, I know you had a little bit of experience with Tony Baxter, with George Head.
Yeah.
How was that educational?
Yeah, Tony's an amazing guy, and George Head ran the theme park program at Savannah College of Art and Design, and he asked me to come and give a talk about this Indiana Jones show, and Tony happened to be there doing a separate talk about his work there. So Tony is somebody I've always had a lot of respect for.
What a 1-2 punch! So the Indiana Jones stunt spectacular with the Indiana Jones adventure ride.
Right. And also, Tony had done work all over Disney, but George Head was really, I think, instrumental in bringing a lot of people to Savannah. Unfortunately, he's died now, but he was.
What a legacy there!
He was a great guy, and I worked with him.
Josh Stedman's there teaching now still, and
right.
So proud
of him.
Bringing the next generation.
When I started out in this business, there was no colleges teaching this kind of industry. Now there are a number of places you can go and learn about how this industry works, and
there's other ways to learn rather than building your own fiberglass boat. Like, what a concept!
Yeah, in my day, you went to art school, and you hoped you could find a job. Now people go to art school with a very specific purpose. They're either going to go into game design or animation or illustration or 3D design, or theme park design.
Experience design.
Yeah, experience design.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. So now that you have the option of spending your time however you freely choose, where are you pouring your passion and energy?
Well, I've always been a painter and a sculptor, and I've always kept that going, weekends and evenings and things. So now I'm getting to do that full time. And that's great.
So that Monet influence is rubbing off, even though the town was demoed.
Yeah, well, I would put myself in the same category as that, but it's a great pleasure to be able to do that in full time for once.
Well, Philip, we are so grateful that you would take the time to spend and pour into myself, really the Theme Entertainment Association, and particularly, the inspiring the next generation of artists that may or may not have figured out which of those paths they want to follow. But thanks for your journeys around the world and back, and so glad that your boat made it across the Atlantic without me too. Yeah, impressive. Thanks.
Well, thank you, and thanks for doing this. This is a great program, I think.
Thanks, Phil.
Well, howdy, Phil.
Hello there.
Even more in the reel. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for hanging with us this fine evening, especially if you're not on Pacific Standard Time. Yeah, looking good, my friend.
I don't know if you know, but Mel's group, Storyland Studios, made that video and edited it, and I thought you did a great job.
Oh, thanks. Work in progress. We're trying to learn as we play. We've all got day jobs, but it's definitely a worthy side hustle to capture masters. And by the way, since our jam session there, your former partner, our long-term collaborator, Robin Hall, was also joined your esteemed ranks of being awarded a TIA Master. So
right. Well deserved, actually.
Well deserved. Probably way overdue, actually. If I'm not mistaken, I think he actually kind of almost is a category killer in terms of maybe the first TIA Master that is specifically designated towards a subject near and dear to my heart, master planning, since that's what I've studied for most of my life. And man, talk about a true guru and well-deserved recognition.
Yeah, he's a great master planner, and I had the pleasure to work with him for a long time, and he's brilliant. He's really clever and a funny guy too. On top of that, got a good sense of humor.
Well, not just a funny guy, but just one of the best in terms of our entire species, I would say, right. In terms of just character.
I would definitely agree with that. Yeah,
and I think that's the case with anyone that's ever worked with him. So. Don't want it to sound like a eulogy or anything. We may have him on next week. So, well, again, thanks to everyone for joining. Love seeing all the friends and recognized peers and collaborators. Let me start off with a little bit of the Q&A. Adam actually kind of asks a really kind of broad question of, based on the tenure, the kind of the multi-decade track, both at Disney on and off again, as well as Vertex on your own. He's just asking biggest changes that you've seen over the years when you're thinking about, beginning, end of the project, the process, the challenges. What would you say are the biggest?
From a design point of view, when I started, we were all drawing on boards with parallel motion bars and pencils and erasers and nowadays, if you go into a design studio, none of that is around. It's all computers, right? And so I'm from the era of the pencil and the board and paper. And I never really made the transition, which is probably why, it's probably a good thing that I'm not in that business anymore. But it was quite a sort of interesting view of things. I mean, I think some of the tools that are around now are really, amazing. I mean, like 3D modeling of parks, and then you could take a model and turn it around and look at it from the other side, and that kind of thing is really brilliant, and even in building construction, the fact that the 4D modeling, where you're looking at things in time as they're getting built, and which things go in first, and a lot of the mistakes that we encountered in the early days nowadays just wouldn't exist, Yeah,
I like to think of it as it's not quite fully dummy proof, but it definitely helps you, not need to keep quite as many things in your head if you're drawing an abstract elevation or section.
I mean, I remember when we were working on Epcot, we were working on the Universe of Energy. And we pointed out to the contractor that we had these very large dinosaurs that had to go into the building, and he had to leave, and it wasn't going to go through an ordinary door,
Right.
It was a brontosaurus or something like that. So he was kind of surprised at the fact that we had to leave a whole side of the building open, to get these things in.
What a concept. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating because that's the difference of course of Hollywood sound stages with the big hangar doors versus this wonderful piece of expressionist, almost modern architecture with the photovoltaic roofs that doesn't exactly function the same way as that blank canvas of a sound stage.
Right.
Freddie asks, how do you begin the storytelling process in a fixed space like a battleship? Yeah, talk about a limited canvas, not exactly a sound stage, not exactly a show building. When you have that, I mean, talk about confined, extreme, tight spaces. How does that work?
Generally, it's interesting in museums. There's normally some expert, a historical expert, and in that case, we had the story of the USS Iowa and its life through World War II and beyond was really told by the local historian that is sort of part of the ship. And so we started with that, and then we took his ideas and tried to convert it into an exhibit. And that means a lot of editing and a lot of sort of taking pieces out of the story, and generally we finish up doing a lot less than the historian would like us to do. Covering a lot less ground. But that's in the nature of exhibits, right? You have to simplify things, and you have to, but at the same time, you're enriching the story by using graphics and video and sound and things. So hopefully you get the idea over, but the original story comes from those guys,
Well, so I remember one of the most impactful moments for me. We had kind of finished the conversation. We were out to lunch at my favorite Mexican restaurant that we designed, and you threw me for a loop when you talked about you being part of this rarefied air of folks that had actually conceived and designed an entire theme park that actually was built, and the fact that you did that under the auspices of Universal at the time. And do you mind sharing that? Because I didn't hear about that. And
that was Porto Europa, which was built in Japan for Mitsubishi, who at the time owned Universal. They owned MCA, actually, the Universal parent company, and it was developed for the owner of Mitsubishi. And it was a small theme park. I think I forget how many acres, 15 acres or something like that, on a little island in the middle of Wakayama Bay. And this was before Universal Studios Japan. So it was in a way the first sort of experience of Universal in a foreign country. And it was quite an experience for us. We had a small team. At the time, they were building Universal in Florida, which was the big expenditure, the big effort was going on there. So our job was really a side job for the company. But it came out very well. The movie art directors that were doing the scenery, the facades of the buildings were great under Norm.
Newberry.
Norm Durgis.
Oh, right.
Newberry.
Yeah.
Norm Newberry.
All those Norms.
Was really a great art director, and his team were fantastic. And so it was a great pleasure to work on. I was the sort of creative director on the project, and we had some amazing people. We had working there who later on became much bigger leaders in the theme park industry.
And a big deal.
Trowbridge was one of them.
Yeah. Pretty awesome. Yeah. And blew me away. I mean, the photos you showed, it looks great, actually. And I've been to Bob Ward's house and seen all the unbuilt designs for Universal projects around the world. And the fact that this thing actually got done while everybody else was busy doing the.
And we were working with, virtual reality and things that were, in a way, before that time. And we had a simulator ride called Safari that was, nowadays it would all be done with CG, but in those days we were doing it with cameras on tracks in smoky rooms, shooting overnight, and that kind of, frame by frame sort of. But it was a lot of fun to work on,
That's wonderful. Sam is asking, and by the way, Small World, one of our listeners, Sam Way, his dad actually is the director of the Iowa Museum. So I thought that's amazing. And I've known Sam in his career over at Universal and seen him come up. Really proud of Sam and what a small world. He was asking what the most challenging figure or piece of Epcot that you had a chance to deal with.
Yeah, interesting. I worked on a lot of different things in Epcot. We initially were working on the dinosaurs for the Universe of Energy, which were taken from stationary dinosaurs that Disney had built before for the train ride. And so we had to take the stationary dinosaurs and make them animated. And the animation guys handled all the movement inside the figure. But the skins that work for a stationary dinosaur do not work for a moving dinosaur. You have to add in extra folds of material for the skin to allow the neck to turn around and that kind of thing. So that was a real education for me in trying to figure out how to do this, because I'd never done animation before or even skins or animation. But, we were all thrown into this because there's a deadline and, you got to get it done. So it was a lot of fun working on it,
Well, Darren's asking the same question I had in mind, because if I had anything to do with the Indiana Jones stunt spectacular, I would absolutely want to get in on the action. Did you ever have a chance to kind of jump the line and be one of the guest volunteer participants, either yourself or any of your friends or family? Because that seems like that would be a pretty awesome superpower.
Yeah, no, I never did that, but I think because we were so anxious about the whole thing, it was done on such a short time frame and such a that we were always wondering what's going to go wrong next. Like we wanted to make sure that it would run smoothly, and so we finished up. Working pretty hard, and Frank Weigand, I think, especially as a show engineer. I mean, he finished up sleeping there on the site a lot of the nights, and it was a real effort, to get this thing open.
Well, Frank's actually with us on the call in Zoom. He's asking for you to talk about the Hoberman Sphere.
Oh yeah, well, this was one of the first projects that I did as a sculpture, and it was a very sort of complicated project. It was done for Journey Partnership, and they were doing a big shopping mall in a little town called Otaru in the north of Japan.
I've seen the drawings for that. Yeah.
And we went to New York, Frank and I, to talk to Hoberman. And we got a license from him for the sphere, and he has this patented sort of expanding mechanism that allows this to grow from a little tight sphere up to a big 15 feet diameter sphere. And we got the drawings from him, and then Frank sort of went through them and improved on various versions of it, because Frank, Frank being Frank, he likes to do this. And Donnie Anderson did all the machining for it. He was a local LA guy, CNC machinist, and we did the fabrication and the sort of troubleshooting with Donnie and Frank. And, we delivered it in Japan, and it worked. It was great. It worked really well, But I remember the day we actually delivered it was in the middle of the winter, and the crane operator had to lift this sphere, which was quite a big thing. It's about a ton of aluminum, and it lifted up onto the building, and then we were going to drag it to an opening to lower it into the building. And the crane operator just was shaking his head. And I said, well, what's the problem? And he said, I can't see the end of the crane because it was snowing so hard. So we had to put it off until the next day, until the storm had cleared a little bit. And then we got it up there. But it was a very strange sort of mixture of high-tech, because the sphere itself and the mechanism was very high-tech. And this snow and in the area, the whole sort of environment there was pretty basic,
Wow. I can't imagine, those war stories over the years that you've encountered. Earlier today I was able to have a conversation with Bob Weiss, and we were talking about, his pride and beyond things that you've designed or built, really the pride in people that you've helped kind of develop, whether it's just, kind of an original spark of inspiration, whether it's actually someone you've had bandwidth or time to pour into as a mentor. Is there anyone that you want to call out that you're a proud, son or daughter in the trade, and is there any recommended outlets for that you found, whether it's internships, whether it's teaching, whether it's just kind of working side by side?
Yeah, I mean, to mention Bob Weiss, Bob Weiss was really a great team leader, and on that Disney MGM Studio Tour, as we called it, project, he was the lead guy, and he gave us a lot of room to work. So each of the teams was sort of essentially allowed to develop the project as they could best do it, And then Bob would come in if you needed help. You could call up Bob and say, hey, please, I need help here. And he would come over. But otherwise, he would stay out of it, which was a very sort of empowering way of running a project, from my own experience, I've had, a lot of people that came into Vertex, which was a small company. It was like 6 people, but like Droney Engar, for instance, who came in as an architect, and he had no idea that what he was getting into, I don't think. And, he stayed around for a long time and finished up as a great master planner and great theme park designer. I think it was a surprise to him to see this kind of thing, I don't think he had any idea that architecture could be applied to theme parks, and yet it's a big part of the park.
Sure. Well, I know he's working for Pete Wimberly's old firm now, so that's a natural, logical progression. And I know Bob's working on a book for his mentor, Marty Sklar, so maybe you have to write Bob's book, and Dron's going to have to write your book. So we'll figure out how to pay this forward. But, Philip, thank you so much for giving us this time, and thanks for everyone that joined in, all the great questions and the conversation.
You're very welcome.
And man, your impact, legacy over the years has been just so great. I personally would love to get over to Japan with you and check out that theme park that I had never heard of. That was like just...
We'll have to do that one day. It's still going. It's still running.
Yeah, it looks great. So thanks so much, Philip, and thanks for everyone. Really appreciate you guys.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.